I want you to reflect on these wonderful speakers that we've had, which cover such a diversity of nutrition research, from the community aspects of having good interactions with the tribal administrations to the clinical aspects with a very important focus on dietary control in obesity in Indian women, and now the community aspects, which Lisa presented to us with using an app that's generally available for the Maori in New Zealand. So I guess I have to lead this, see who's going to answer the question. For the panel, it seems the North American tribes emphasis controlling the calorie budget with good food. I mean, exercise is always given mention, but it seems from my conversations, not only with Lisa, but with other Maori, is that there's a preference for having an exercise emphasis for the control of obesity. That might just be in the North Island, I don't know.
You've probably been meeting with Hirangi Heke.
Yes.
And so he's a very vocal and a great advocate for health and wellbeing for Māori in New Zealand. And he has a new framework called an Atua Matua framework, which is sort of based on taking your creation stories and using those to inspire people to get out and exercise by finding where those stories originate from. And he's a physical activity person, so he often argues that exercise is of more interest to Māori, but I would disagree, actually. I think both are important. Talking about food and nutrition can be difficult for people, but we've seen a lot of changes in our local marae. So the marae, the community houses that a community is based around, often do a lot of catering. They hold events or conferences or funerals and things for the community, and they provide food as part of that. And the food quality has changed immensely over the last 10 to 15 years, where there's a lot more fruits and vegetables and salads. I think both are very important.
All right. Tiffany, you might want to chime in.
So because this is a nutrition conference, I didn't tell people how I feel about physical activity and promoting it. I think it's really important. And I highlighted a little bit when I talked about glucose disposal. Another way to lower blood sugar is by getting rid of that energy instead of having to do an injection of insulin. But I think it's really important to get a point across about how regular physical activity is very important for health and reducing death and morbidity, and it's very important for weight management as well. So I don't want to underestimate the contribution of physical activity to health, well-being, and body weight.
I'm sure that's true, but it's also the case that in some of the northern environments, it's not easy for people to get outside. And doing exercise in small, crowded, poverty houses is not easy. And it's the same with the Maori.
I like to think of exercise as something where I'm working. I mean, I grew up in a household where we didn't have a car. I had to bike and walk to get to go and take care of business and do things. And so to me, I like to do work. Give me a project to do in the house or the yard or something. I would like to do my physical activity with a goal in mind. I don't know how I became so goal-directed in my life, but I did. So I sort of have to be doing something else at the same time. And so if I talk to other people, other patients and people who are wanting physical activity and they're like, well, I don't have time. It's like, hold on now. You can study for, your exams with a video monitor and be, running at the speed of light at the same time. You can be doing your work. So I like a multitasking kind of approach to physical activity. Mm-hmm. Instead of just, I think I'm going to nonchalantly go and take a 4-mile walk today. It's like, really? What? In what world is that possible?
For us, I was just going to say, we're not snowbound either, so we never have too much problem with the weather stopping people from getting out of the house.
Well, there's a lot of snow to be cleared away too.
Oh.
And, you know, you need to get to places and do things, and it's not like the snow stops us here. In fact, it's just a beautiful gift.
Linda.
In regard to the caloric budget, I think it's really important for people to understand, and Dr. Beckman mentioned it, the climate that you live in. Now, if you live in a southern climate, the breakdown for calories per molecule is 4 and 4 for protein and carbo. Fat, it happens to be 9, so you take the same size of molecule and you get more than twice the energy. Alcohol is a little different, it's 6. But if you live in a northern climate and say your ancestors were hunting and gathering, what do you think they took with them to survive? It wasn't, a bunch of carbos. I mean, it was beef jerky and, all these really high packed calories. So it's really important to, if you research this or advise your clients or patients, to understand where they're coming from and what they do for everyday life. And in regards to physical activity, as a physiologist, I used to prescribe simple things like walking. I mean, how can you get hurt doing that? Well, if you don't know what the androgenous level of your insulin is, I mean, what you're making yourself, not what's added, and you prescribe to that patient, which may have a level of like 17, which is extremely high, and they go out and walk, and they're also taking some sort of medication to make more insulin, poof, they're into reaction. And so you really have to be careful of that. Request them. Sometimes they'll get some pushback, but request that you know what their androgenous insulin level is so that you can properly prescribe or offer exercise. And exercise is so key, and people just need to understand that the way our ancestors used to live, a lot of walking, a lot of physical activity, and we don't need to do that now to survive, unfortunately. and so a lot of people say, yeah, well, I got my riding lawnmower, and I said, well, how big is your yard? Oh, it's about like the size of the center stick. Okay, well, ever heard of a push mower? Or how far do you have to walk to get your mail? Oh, I take the car about a quarter of a mile. It's like, think about it, folks. And so the more that you can do, and we actually did some research on a reservation up north, and we validated the metabolic burn for wild ricing. And in this community, the female sits in the front of the canoe, pulls the rice in, which is quite heavy, and you whack it with a stick, and it all falls into the canoe. That reached a moderate level of physical activity, believe that or not. And then the other group that we tested after a lot of ceremony, because the people had to wear a mask on how much carbon dioxide they expelled, and so they looked kind of like space aliens. But regardless, whenever they were doing wild ricing and jingle dress dancing, those dresses are heavy. That also reached a moderate level. So, sometimes we have to help science understand it. Yeah, we've been telling you all along this is good. And they'll go, well, where's the numbers? Here's the numbers. That's this day and age.
I like what you said about walking. Yeah. I was thinking about, as Native people, generations ago, probably several generations now, we were actually running a lot, moving, hunting. We were being chased. It was about survival. And so if you chase me, I'll run. But will I just run just to run? Probably not. And there are a lot of people today that think, some Indian people have things or knowledge or something they want or need or help they need. And so you got to kind of chase us down, I guess, because we're busy. So that's exercise.
One thing I see in New Zealand is that, my dad's generation were very poor. They had enough to eat, but they were very poor, and they worked a lot on their gardens and stuff. And then they went off to the cities and worked, and they got all the trappings of Western life. And my dad is addicted to his car. And lots of his generation, they just love having a car. He would rather have a car than a house. So why would you walk somewhere if you could drive? So let's change that mindset.
So here's a question about chasing, following Tiffany. How would you advise junior Native researchers who need grants in this system? They're set up in the academic system to have to chase money. How would you advise them?
Welcome to our world.
Work hard.
I mean, seriously, I meant it. And I said, as a tribal employee, I worked every weekend. I worked every holiday. I used to set my kids with me because I kind of felt guilty about that. And I like the term chase. But, it's our responsibility as professionals to mentor young junior researchers. And I'm certain that all of us are happy to do that. We have, different procedures that we've used over the years to be successful at grant writing. But, ask for help.
And don't be afraid to align yourself with people that you don't know very well. Get to know them and align yourself with good, solid, strong people that have good energy and good skill sets so that you can learn things from them, and then you can take that learning back to your own communities. And you can do that through learning grantsmanship. Mm-hmm. Deidre Buchwald, Spiro Manson, they're like the queen and king, or king and queen of grantsmanship, and so I still have a lot to learn from them about writing grants. But the other thing is to get someone to read your grant, a few people, a couple times, and have it done well in advance so that they have enough time to really look at it. And make sure that what you're trying to do, first of all, is really important work that a lot of people are going to benefit from. Figure that out first before you start going on this quest, because it's a long, arduous journey.
It's probably more relevant to you guys, that question, the last one.
We have a quick minute and a half here. Colonization and historical trauma impact Indigenous women and men differently, physically and mentally. How has gender played a role in your work, and how has sexuality, especially the LGBTQ, played a role? Big question.
Historically, we've had two-spirited people in our communities which were held in high regard. They had a role to play and as part of the respective tribal community, and truly were in high regard. That's changed a little bit with a lot of political influence and so on. As far as I know, a lot of two-spirited people still are, but it has become more challenging.
I think gender had a role in my study because as a neuroscientist, I was told to control for the effects of gender on the brain in my work. And I found that culturally difficult because we have a lot of American Indian men who need good health, and they need to be included and taken care of. And so there's a colleague of mine, Kayumi Sinclair, who's written a nice grant and another grant and gotten funding to actually help with that. And so I felt better hearing that from her, that, okay, yes, I'm doing the study neural correlates of food reward in American Indian women. And she's like, okay, well, I've got the guys. And I'm like, good, then let's roll on this diabetes prevention thing. And so one day she's over on the ground at Indian Health Board, and I find out she's over there, and I'm like, I better get over there and help her, And so there we were, working together, not just with one gender, but everyone, all comers. And so I think that's
nice.
That's how gender had a role in my research. It was sort of forced by neuroscientists, and I'm like, seriously?
Any Maori perspectives on gender roles?
I haven't, and it hasn't been something that we've particularly considered, although we try to make sure that our research that we do supports everyone who wants to participating. So we try to be as inclusive as possible. And I sit on a number of grant assessing panels, and certainly we see a lot of research coming through that does explore issues that are specific to LGBT people, particularly around the mental health space in Māori and Pacific communities, and it does get funded. So, and they're seen in New Zealand as a priority group that suffer poor health. So, there's desire to
Well,
fund
I'm
it.
afraid our time is up, and in addition to thanking the speakers, of course, I want to encourage you to continue to think about questions you might ask them and find them at the speakers' tables over lunch in Ballroom 1. Okay? So with that, please let me encourage you to thank Linda and Tiffany and Lisa for their great morning